So you can see how lovely and airy and light that loaf is. We've got a little bit of flour on the surface. Turn our loaf out. Okay, now we can shape it ready for a tin, which case you'll need to oil it well. Okay, even if it says non-stick, don't believe it. It's not always true. But if you don't have a tin, then all you need is a baking tray. And I'm just going to pop a decent amount of flour on the surface of that, just to stop the loaf from sticking. Okay, and we're going to shape it into a tin shape. So how I like to do this, I'm really gentle. I'm not deflating the dough massively. I'm handling it really gently. If I deflate it entirely down, I'm going to make a very tight crumb, and I prefer not to have a really tight crumb. I quite like a regular crumb pattern going on. So we take the 2 points at the top and we stretch them out, and I always describe these as like little mini mouse ears, and we fold them in to the middle of the dough. Dust off any excess flour, and you do the same at the bottom. Okay, stretching them out into mini mouse ears reversed and into the middle of the dough. And then what we want to do is just fold it down. Okay, and we'll fold it down to the middle, and if you feel it needs it, you fold the two sides there into the middle at that point, and you keep folding it until you have this lovely batard shape. Okay, and then you can just cup your hands underneath just to tighten up a little bit, and then if you've got any really big bubbles like that one, just deflate it. Okay, and then you can pop it into the tin if you have one. If you don't have a tin, just pop it onto your floured baking tray. Okay, and we're just going to let that proof. And it's quite nice to have a little bit of a floury top to it sometimes, you know, like a little flowered bloomer. So we're just going to let that prove. I'm going to cover it so that it doesn't develop a crust. Okay, and then it's going to be anything from 15-20 minutes in a warm room to half an hour to an hour in a cooler room. Okay, so it's time to look now at how it's doing, whether it's ready to go in the oven. So you can see it's grown quite substantially since I shaped it, and it will do when it's free form like this. It has plenty of room to expand, but you can also see that it still has plenty of structure. Okay, so it's not overproofed. If I'm putting a finger in, it will come back almost to where it was before within like 1 or 2 seconds. Okay, so that's a really good sign. It's not overproofed. So when you're ready to slash your loaf, you want to be using a really sharp knife. This is a Victorinox serrated tomato knife. This works well. A very sharp knife, whichever sharp knife you've got. This is a baker's razor. Okay, and with this you want to be changing the razor blade regularly, and you go in at a flat angle perpendicular to the loaf to rip the skin, okay, of the loaf, and then you'll get a good oven spring that way. So you can either go across and do a sausage cut like you would for a bloomer, or you can do a cut from the very top to the very bottom of the loaf. Okay, and if you're going to do that, you want to go slightly off centre, and you want to hold your blade quite flat to the loaf so that it tears underneath the skin. I'm going to use my razor to do this one. Okay, and we're going to go right to the bottom. Can you see I've gone very sort of flat to the loaf there? What I'm hoping for is that's going to be enough to lift it up in the oven spring. So we're going to put this in the oven. This oven is heated up to 220. Inside it's got solid baking sheets. Okay, they're blue steel baking sheets, so they get really hot and hold the heat well. You want to put bread, even if it's in a tin, onto a hot solid surface, because that will help with the oven spring and the lift of the loaf. Okay, so it's going to go in the centre of the oven and I'm going to steam the oven. I'm going to put plenty of steam. and shut the door. Okay, so the purpose of that steam is, what happens when you put a loaf into an oven is hopefully it's still got some activity that's going to happen in there. It hasn't overproved. So the heat of the oven causes the yeast to have a last hurrah, if you like, and it does a lot of a very quick sort of fermentation, but that is minimal compared to the carbon dioxide that's already trapped inside your bread. Will expand in the heat. Okay, so that just lifts the loaf a little bit more than when we put it in. And what we're wanting is for the crust to lift. It'll only do that if there's plenty of steam in the oven, because otherwise the crust gets hard before it can spring up. So steam's really important for a good loaf of bread. Okay, it also creates a nice shiny loaf and improves the colour. Okay, so let's see, so it's had half an hour in at 220 now, so we'll have a look, see what it looks like. Okay, so there it is. We'll check in a second whether or not it's baked. So let's have a little feel. See the floury bottom. Certainly sounds baked, so to tell how things are baked, use your senses, okay? So yes, you can look for that. It's beautifully golden all over, evenly coloured. It feels really light, which is always a good indicator, and it knocks hollow. It's very subjective, that. So I'm just going to pop it on this tray and we'll get a temperature probe and we'll just check the internal temperature and then we can be absolutely sure. Okay, so to check that it's definitely baked, we're going to put in a temperature probe into the loaf, and if it reaches 90 degrees centigrade, then we know for definite that it's baked inside. And there we go, we've got it up beyond 90, so we know from the look and the feel and using the temperature probe as an absolute extra, we're certain that this is baked. Now it needs to be cooled, okay, because if I was to cut into this now, what would happen it would seem like I hadn't baked the loaf correctly, because you now need the bread to cool properly so that all of the starch is set. And if you don't allow it to cool in time, what you do is you cut into it and the starches haven't set yet and it seems very gummy and like you underbaked it. And actually all it really needed to do was cool properly. So at least half an hour if you can bear it, before you cut into it and try your first slice.